Years ago, I put coil splits on this guitar so that I could have either a single coil or humbucker sound. Fairly common modification and fairly simple to do. My problem is when I'm in single coil mode, I feel like the sound is a bit too thin. Conversely, in humbucking mode, I feel like the sound is too dull. So I wanted some kind of variation in between. It's just a simple on-off switch. But I thought, why can't I make that variable? Use a variable resistor to choose how much of the secondary coil I want. So that's what brings me to today's project. So in case you're not familiar with how coil splits work, we have a humbucker here, which is basically two single coil pickups put together, and then they're soldered together in the middle. So what I did was I ran a wire over to this switch. You basically just ground the tap point between the two coils, right? And thereby negating its existence. Obviously, the first thing I need to do is remove this switch. Save that for another project. So while I'm doing this, I chose 100K pots because they should give me a good compromise and a fair amount of range in my sweep. So if I, with a 100K, it's not going to give me the complete full effect of both pickups or both coils working together, but fairly close. If I went with like a 250K, then I would get the full effect of both coils, or at least close enough for all practical purposes, but at the same time, I would lose a fair amount of the nuance in between. So you basically just barely crack it open and get most of the effect of the humbucker. Whereas by using a slightly lower value, I have more subtlety in between, but I will always be leaking a little bit of the secondary pickup, the secondary coil, excuse me, to ground. And I'm okay with that because I don't really do a lot of aggressive material, so. All right, that looks pretty good. Whoops. I guess it would have been smart to make sure that these holes match before I started. Yeah, it's actually really close. When I looked up these pots online, I figured they would be pretty close, but I can actually fit these in here without drilling. Awesome. Okay, that's one. Stick that in there for good keeping. Safekeeping. What I did on these pots for my own peace of mind is I broke off the one that I don't want, the terminal that I don't want, and I bent up the two that I did. So it helps prevent shorts down the road and makes it so that I don't have to think about it when I'm doing the soldering work. I should note that this guitar has been more or less in its current condition for probably 10 years. So I've been really satisfied with the options that it gives me for the most part, but there's always been this little lingering nagging. I could be getting a little bit more out of this than I have been. I've been thinking about this project for a while, and I finally just decided to recently tackle it. For those of you that are not familiar with soldering, this is always at least a three-handed job. At least. Much better than the first one. One thing I forgot earlier, in order for these to sit flush, we have to break off these little tabs here. I could drill a hole in the body of the guitar in which those can sit, but not really necessary. And that should do it. There we go. Okay. Got these fancy little black knobs that should match my existing trim fairly well. is fairly solid. All right, before I put on the back again, I'm going to make sure this actually works. This was a worthy experiment. It seemed to work pretty well. One thing I notice is that these knobs in this position kind of get in the way of this middle pickup on-off switch. So I don't know. I might try getting smaller knobs or moving them perhaps to a different position. I'm not quite sure yet, but I'll play with it for a while. And in the meantime, I at least accomplished my goal, which is to get somewhere between humbucking and single coil. So yeah. Hope this was worth your time, and have a good one.